Welcome Jane Park, who is the CEO and founder of the innovative beauty brand Julep. Also, the recent winner of GeekWire's CEO of the Year 2014. I'm going to hand it over to Jane.
Hey, thanks so much for coming to join us tonight. I'm super excited to be here, and I'd love to spend a little bit of time just telling you a little bit about me and my story, and then about Julep, and would love to leave some time. This is a pretty intimate group, but so I wanted to hear your questions and be able to sort of speak to things that are on your mind. So excited to spend the next little bit with you talking about things that are hopefully important to you. But a little bit about me. So I always like to say there are a couple different ways you can tell our story, and one is about all of the success and the fundraising and various pieces that I'll cover off a little bit more in talking about Julep. But the sort of personal side of the story is that I grew up in Canada. I was actually born in Korea, and my dad lost his family when he was 9. And so what happens when they put up the border in a country, so between North and South Korea, is that they don't tell you it's going to happen in advance. And so he was at school and was walking home, and then there was a border, and he's never seen his parents again. So he grew up on his own from the age of 9 and was super scrappy. He went to an American GI and actually told him, I am a boy, you are a girl, which was the only English he knew and was totally inaccurate because the GI was a guy. But took an interest in my dad, and for those of you guys who are old enough to know MASH, it was really like that my dad became sort of a translator for him in exchange for food, and it was what sort of got him the ability to learn more English and eventually immigrate and start a business. And so when people say it's hard to start a business, which absolutely it is, and it's hard to succeed at it, which absolutely it is, I always think that at least I speak the language. So it's a huge head start from where my parents started out. And I think their hard work and their ability to create a life and a business out of absolutely nothing, is a total inspiration to me. I think no matter how hard I work, my parents had a 7-Eleven growing up, and I didn't realize until much later that 7-Eleven actually stands for 7 days a week, 11 hours a day. And so if you are a family running that with no help, so between the two of you, you are doing 7 days a week, 11 hours a day, and we lived above it growing up. So it's funny because a lot of times when I think about being a mom and running a business, I think, actually, I spent a lot of time on my own. My parents used to drop me off at the library on Saturdays with a sandwich. And come pick me up at 5 when it closed. And, I don't think you could do that today. Like, I think I was 6. I read my way through the entire library. And today that might be like they would call Child Protective Services or something. Otherwise, I would do that maybe to my kids. But we're so hard on ourselves for everything that, as especially those of us with kids. And I often think, hey, I grew up with a lot of laughter, a lot of love. I think I turned out okay. And my parents just had to work. They didn't have a choice. And so that gives me a lot of freedom to realize that kids are resilient. Families can come together, people can grow up in lots of different ways. I know that my kids have a lot more opportunities than I did growing up. And regardless of where you come from, there's a lot of good luck, a lot of great people who help you along the way, and a lot of hard work that helps take you to where you're meant to be. So I think that's a big comfort for me as a parent, that in the lots of things that I do to screw up every day, that I know that as long as there is love and there is honesty and there is a relationship and trust and connection, there's a lot that can happen. And that's sort of the basis that that I brought to founding Julep. It really has been about connection. So fast forward, I was actually my parents had a cousin who lived outside of Princeton, and they sent me an application, I think the week before it was due. I was filling out this application. I only had one paper application. It was beige. I still remember this. So I had to buy beige liquid paper because I made a lot of mistakes in the typing. And in the spot where they said, do you have any extenuating circumstances you'd like to talk about, I actually wrote, I'm really sorry, I've never typed before. This application is a mess. I think they meant to ask, like, hey, have you had a parent who passed away or something serious? And it didn't occur to me the biggest thing that was a disaster at that moment was that this application looked like a mess, and it was the only one I had, and there was no photocopying or there was no easy anything back then. I wrote it up and off it went. And then I'd take the SATs. I didn't realize in Canada you don't have to take the SATs. So I went to take the test, and I didn't realize you had to pay for it, because you don't have to pay for those kinds of things in Canada. And a parent behind me saw me and said, are you kidding? You're here without parents and you don't have any money. And he paid for me. And then which is like crazy because I was sort of competitive with, his child, right? And so it gave me his address and said, just send me the check when you get home. And if it weren't for that person, my whole life would have unfolded differently, right? I wouldn't have been able to go to the college I went to, and then I went to law school. I went to law school actually because I was going to go to India to work on a women's cooperative. This is a true story. And I knew that my parents would freak out that I wanted to do this. And so I applied to law school as something to tell them, hey, I've deferred a year, and I'm going to come back and become a lawyer, which is great, because all Koreans can do is become doctors and lawyers. And so I picked one. I'm totally going to do that. I got into a good law school, but I'm just going to do this thing instead. I have actually never seen my parents cry, and the moment I told them I was going to India, they both started bawling. And they were like, you can't do this, you are our dream, you have to finish your education. This education, by the way, which was just an excuse to do this other thing. Somehow I got guilted into going to law school, and there's no such thing, I think, as a mistake at the end of the day, because I met my husband there, and the rest of my life has unfolded really nicely from that, and I have 2 beautiful kids and a wonderful family. The only other time recently that I've seen my parents be super upset and cry is when I told them I was starting Julep. So they said, you're a lawyer. They didn't know I wasn't a lawyer at Starbucks, because actually I worked in law for about 9 months, and I told my husband that I would rather cut off my toe than go to work the next day. And he was like, A, gross, who wants your toe? And B, hey, you have 2 great degrees. Why do you feel so trapped? Which is interesting, right? There are people in the world who are really trapped, and I had the good fortune of not being one of them. But you feel that way sometimes. You feel like you don't have choices, when in fact you have a lot more choices than you can think of. The choices were not cut off your toe or go to work. Like, those were fake choices. The choices were you could try to do something different. So actually I went to go with that sort of thought in mind, like I can do lots of different things. I went to go to work for an Al Gore initiative to get technology into public schools. So I went from a private sector, high-paying legal job. I took a 50% pay cut to do this thing I believed in, which is education, and enabling education to be stronger with the use of technology. It was really great. It was a bipartisan initiative, even though it was with Al Gore, who, as you guys know, invented the internet. And so we started this dialogue, and we had the CEOs of Apple, Steve Jobs, Eckhard Pfeiffer from Hewlett-Packard, all of these amazing luminaries who cared about this issue. And then Monica Lewinsky happened. And, I guess she would say now, like Bill Clinton happened. So anyway, the long and the short of it is that nothing happened on the Hill, and it was really hard at that time to be idealistic and trying to work for change, and having made this huge dramatic life changing effort, and then to have everything stall. And people literally took me aside and said, "Don't worry, Jane, in a few years everything will be okay." And when you're young and you want to work hard and you want to make a difference, making a difference is why a lot of us are here and are sort of listening to each other's stories, right? It's all about trying to become better and making a difference, and that was something that was really hard to do in DC at that time. So I was going to go to business school, and then my husband intervened and said, "How about we pay off the loans of the schools we went to before we do more?" We actually graduated between the two of us with $300,000 in student loans, which we spent 10 years paying off before we ever could afford our first house. That seemed like a sage advice, and at the time, these strategy consulting firms were hiring. So I had the good fortune of getting a job at the Boston Consulting Group, which is a global consulting firm. It was a great experience. Met a lot of people there who were my mentors along the way. That's one huge piece of advice I give to women all the time, is that your mentors can be men, they can be, women. Don't look for people who are perfect in everything that you want to do. That was one mistake that I made early on, is I had this amazing woman I worked for, but she traveled all the time. The job that we worked on, we were sort of traveling 4 days a week to client sites. To exotic places like Cleveland, Ohio. And is anyone from Cleveland here? Okay. You should go there. It's great. There's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I know that I put a lot of pressure on her to be perfect for me. I wanted her to be a great mom and a great mentor and to be everything that I wanted to be so that I could see how it was done. And I was really frustrated. I was like, why would she have kids when she's traveling 4 days a week? I remember thinking that to myself and being very judgy of her. And in retrospect, I think, there was a lot that I learned from her, and there is nobody who is your perfect future self who is leading the life that you were meant to lead that you could copy from. Because otherwise we would all be doing that. It would be so much easier. So I think one huge lesson about mentorship is just learn from all the people around you and learn what you can from anyone, from everyone, because there's no perfect mentor out there. And if a lot of your mentors are people who are very different from you, they have kids, they don't have kids, they're men, there is still a lot to learn about different communication and leadership styles. So anyway, going back to sort of when I came to Seattle, I was recruited to work for Starbucks, did that for a few years, and I think ultimately when I started Julep, it was really because I felt like I had 2 kids, I had a great family, I was really engaged in my personal life, and I felt like there was more that I wanted out of my professional life. So this was a huge surprise to me, actually. I thought that once I had kids, I wouldn't care as much about work, and the opposite happened to me. Once I had kids, it meant more that I do something meaningful with my work. And so I went to start Julep. There's no good time to start a family, and there's no good time to start a business. And every time is a perfect time to start a family, and every time is a perfect time to start a business. So there are lots of challenges with starting a business when you have 2 kids and your youngest is 18 months. But if you're waiting for all of the stars to align, I think there is no such thing as the perfect sign from God, or God is way too subtle for me to understand the signs in any event. Going back to my parents, the only other time I saw them cry was when I told them I was starting Julep. They were like, "Another Korean starting a nail business? Are you kidding?" What will we tell our friends? It's funny when you are operating in a different world. I really, in starting Julep as the sort of Starbucks of nail parlors and creating an elevated experience where we wanted to give the service providers health care and not have toxic fumes, all of those things were things that, I was approaching from an all new lens. It never occurred to me that I was another Korean starting a nail business until actually, I started pitching some VCs, and they were like, "Are you good at doing nails?" And actually, my daughter has an answer to that. She's like, "Mommy, even though you run Julep, you're terrible at this." Having had my parents cry before and having changed my life course, I realized, hey, I know what this is about. So the second time they did this, I sort of realized that it would pass. I put some grandkids in front of them and said, look, over here. Go play with them and torture them. and went off to start Julep. I always say that life is a constant repetition. I actually think that everything happens continuously all the time. There's always a do-over, there's always a repeat, even if it's not the same situation. So what I learned from that first time that I sort of really took to heart that my parents would given up so much to help me have a great life, that there was something that they really wanted me to do, and so I did it. And then I realized, it's about you at the end of the day. You're accountable to yourself. You can't blame anybody else for your decisions. And so the second time it happened, I was ready. I did something different. And I think that recognizing those patterns of when something is happening to you, it might be a different boyfriend, a different husband, a different child, or a different employee, but situations that happen again and again, it's great to be able to have the pattern recognition to avoid the definition of insanity, right, which is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So that is how I found myself in 2007 starting Julep. And let me tell you a little bit about who we are. So we're an omni-channel beauty brand, and today we launch over 300 innovative new products every year. That's almost a product a day, which is super exciting. And today we're carried on julep.com as well as Sephora and Nordstrom and QVC. And we've been in Oprah's Favorite Things and been featured in Vogue and Allure, which is all very exciting. We, as a company, believe that beauty is about connection, not competition. That was an important thing to me in getting involved in the beauty category, that it was about changing the idea of beauty to be about exploring outside of your comfort zone and be expressing yourself, not that there's a standard idea for an age or a look that everybody had to be, that men are telling us what we should be. And then another exciting thing about Julep is that we really work to support organizations that empower women. So we have a program called Powered by Girlfriends, and whether it's naming our polishes after women who inspire us or making contributions to organizations in product or time or money, it's something that's super important to us from the very beginning. So a lot of our sales today happen through our website on julep.com, and it's been exciting to build a community there. We started our communities in our Seattle area parlors, so the conversations that happen in the parlors are what we've carried online. We're actually often recognized as a company that does amazing things with social media, and that's in part because we have really incredible young women who are so smart and thoughtful and can really genuinely connect with people. It's also in part because we view all of this, newfangled technology as really a way to continue on what people have done all the time. If you stop and you talk to somebody, person to person, that's sort of what social media is about, right? It's about having a conversation in a different format. So if you're trying to do something else that's just your agenda, it's probably hard, and you're going to feel scared, and people are mean sometimes, it's true. But if you are approaching it the way you do any conversation, then I think that's how you get the power out of that type of connection. So the other thing that Julep is about innovation. I think we're innovative in the way that we work, and we're innovative in the way that we think about solving problems. So because I'm not very good at polishing my nails, and it's something that a lot of women have told us, we actually recently developed a product called the Julep Plie Wand, and we worked on it with IDEO, who's the leading design firm in the world. They did the design for Apple early on, so we were working with some phenomenal creative folks. And we created this ergonomic extended wand that helps you polish better. So if you're polishing with if you're writing with a golf pencil, it's hard, right? And so that's why pens are longer and paintbrushes are longer. And so we created this weighted ergonomic wand for people to be able to polish better with. And it's patent pending, and we crowdfunded it and got 5,000 people to buy it sight unseen on the first day that we put it up there. So we're really excited about that. And then is today Wednesday? Just yesterday, we launched our first app. So we have an iOS app where you can take our monthly innovation box and customize it to over 2 million different configurations. So whether it's technology like online, or whether it's in the physical product or in ingredients, we're always pushing the boundaries of what is possible. And we're really excited about what can happen in the shopping experience online. So it's going more mobile. We all know that. We used to see sort of 20 to 30% mobile, and now we're seeing half and half. And I know that the tipping point is about to happen where we're going to start rolling faster into people engaging with brands and doing shopping in a mobile way. So the phone is always with you. The computer is only with you part of the time. And that's why mobile shopping and mobile connection is becoming so much more important. Content is becoming increasingly important as well. The number of times that people do things with a phone next to them, whether it's my daughter putting together, I can't remember those names now, but those elastic bandy things, those of you guys are parents, must have them. Oh, the rainbow loom. Yes. So she's doing that with the iPhone next to her, right? And women are doing things with their iPhone next to them, whether it's creating a sock bun, or it's creating a nail look, or it's creating an eyeshadow look. So it's all about having the content when you need it, right there with you when you need it. And then the other piece is radical customization. We're working on ways to deliver more and more customized experiences. So if you tell me you're a blue-eyed blonde, you should be able to see all of the product that we create on somebody who looks like you. And if you look like me and you're a 43-year-old Asian American woman, you should have products that look like you, or people who look like you, so that you can see what the products and colors really look like on you. So that's the exciting thing about technology, is that there are ways to really deliver a more delightful and a more engaging and a more informative and sort of empathetic customer experience than was ever possible before. And part of what we sort of do to connect with our customers, and also just to make ourselves feel like we're part of doing something bigger than just ourselves, is to give back to organizations that empower women. So this spring, I'm super excited that we launched a color called Malala, and we donated 100% of the cost of creating the color and of shipping. So all of the proceeds, every penny that we collect from that, goes to her foundation to support education of girls. And that, to me, is really important. For Mother's Day, I asked for my kids to donate to an organization that supported education for girls in Africa in honor of the girls who are still missing in Nigeria. And so I think as we who are privileged to have been educated, if the least that we can do is try to help make sure that other girls in the world have similar opportunities. So I was really proud of our team for that. And then over the past year, we've really been delighted to be featured in so many magazines, and a lot of this happened with the Girlfriends Connection. So when we first started being featured in Vogue and In Style, it was really because we leveraged our Girlfriends network to find our way to editors who we could connect with. I went there and I said, hey, we didn't have a PR firm, we didn't have money for that. We didn't, I'd fly to New York on hotel miles, sleep on friends' couches, and go to these editors and say, I have this company called Julep, and we would sort of give them a manicure. I brought a friend with me to give manicures while we tried to talk to them about Julep. So they, women will do anything for a free manicure, right? Wouldn't you? And so we just took that 30 minutes to tell our story, and we didn't know what would come of that. And actually what came out of that was a lot of coverage and sort of engagement with our brands. It was great. We started super scrappy, and it was really sort of women talking to women that got us off the ground. And the other thing I'm really proud about is that we're one of the few women-run companies that are funded by venture capital. So we've been fortunate enough to raise $56 million in venture capital funding, which was hard. Every dollar was hard. Because you're meeting with a lot of people who don't really get your story. So for every yes that I got, there are probably 20 to 30 no's. When I first started Julep, I actually read Howard Schultz's book because I was at Starbucks. And I read the part where he said, he talked about how many people he talked to raise money for Starbucks. So can you imagine what that was like? I have this idea for a coffee chain, right? Will you invest? And so he says that he had about 30 no's for every single yes he got. And so I would keep a tally sheet. So for, when I got to 29 no's, I was like, the next one has to be yes. And so it's been an interesting road, but I definitely think that the right things happen at the end of the day. We ended up with the world's leading venture capital firm, Andreessen Horowitz, who invested in us, as well as Maven here locally, who invested in us from the very beginning, and Madrona, also local. So it's been really terrific to end up on the same team with exactly the right people who you were meant to meet. So I wanted to share kind of the top 10 learnings that I've really sort of gotten out of my experiences, because I have often talked about entrepreneurship as more of a mental illness than a state of nirvana. It's something that I talk about a lot, that people come up to me all the time and say, hey, are you happy because you're an entrepreneur? Are you excited to be your own boss? And really nothing could be farther than the truth. Instead of being my own boss, I used to have one boss who was pretty easy to delight when I was in corporate America. It was pretty easy to figure out what you had to do, and I was pretty good at my job. I can't remember any key mistakes I've ever made before I was an entrepreneur. Starting Julep, I can tell you I make 20 mistakes a day. Some of them personal, like not picking my kids up from school because I forgot, and some of them professional, like not putting the right people in the right roles, or not making the right calls about what products to proceed on, or buying too much of some inventory. Those are probably just the mistakes I made in the last hour. But there are a lot more decisions, and therefore a lot more mistakes. So here's the benefit of the top 10 things I learned. So one of the key things is that you just have to show up. So I went to law school at Yale, and my class was 50-50, men and women. And one thing we realized is one of the most prestigious jobs out of law school is a Supreme Court clerkship. And by the time we got there, it turned out actually from Yale, 80% of the clerks were male, and only 20% women. So we were like, hey, what happened? How do we go from 50-50 to 80-20? And what happened is that women stopped showing up. So if you looked at the percentage of applicants to the Supreme Court, it was 20% women, and 20% got accepted. So when we asked along the way, hey, why didn't more women apply? The answer was, hey, I didn't publish an article, I didn't work for a professor. Who am I to apply for a Supreme Court clerkship? And then we went to the guys, and they were all like, hey, I got straight B's, and I almost flunked out, but I'm super cool. I should be a Supreme Court clerk. They just showed up. They had confidence. They had enthusiasm. Both are important. If I have somebody in front of me with tons of passion and enthusiasm, there's something infectious about that. And at the end of the day, I have a cousin who works at NASA, really, as a rocket scientist. My favorite thing that he says is, even rocket science isn't rocket science. So, a lot of people are capable of doing the job. There is no job that only one person can do. And so if you have a lot of capable applicants, it just matters that you show up and you put up your hand. And that's something that I really, I don't know that I of all of the things that Sheryl Strandberg says, the thing that I believe in most is show up. Just don't take yourself out of the running before you need to. As long as you can, do it for as long as you can. That's one thing I say about my favorite movie, When Harry Met Sally. You know, the part where he says, I'm not going to drive you to the airport. Because we're at the beginning of a relationship and someday I won't be able to drive you to the airport, and then you'll say, why can't you drive me to the airport? It's like, don't worry about that. If that happens, talk about it, figure it out. Do whatever you can for as long as you can. Show up for as long as you can. You don't know what you're going to be like as a parent. You don't know what your life is going to be like. You don't know what the next phase is going to be like. If you can do it now, show up, put up your hand, because that's the only way that the process even gets started. Oops, wrong way. Okay, did I do this the wrong way? Or did I just have 2 glasses of wine and I'm Asian, so I can't figure this out? All right, well, maybe 2 number 10s, huh? Okay, I already talked about this. I do think entrepreneurship is more of a mental illness than nirvana. Enough said. So number 9. Always operate from a hypothesis. This is something that I really believe in. It might not be right, but have a point of view. I think a lot of times, you know, in this room we have a lot of women, so I hope I'm not just excluding you guys, because maybe you think this too, but a lot of times women, I think, feel like, oh, I have to collect all the information before I can have a point of view. And I think it's really important in today's world where it's fast moving, especially if you're anything to do with technology, and just in business today, the speed is so rapid that it's important to have some point of view. It's also important, if you're wrong, to abandon it and enable more data to help you come to the right decision. But I always have a point of view. It might not be right, but I always have the answer that I would give if somebody had a gun to my head. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's come up to me with a gun and said, what would you do on this decision about Julep? But I'm always ready for that, because if you don't have the hypothesis, you don't have somewhere to iterate from. We all just need a starting point. It's much easier to iterate on a poor first draft than to come up with that first draft. So just give yourself the license to write the crappy first draft. And I think that's what the hypothesis is about. I think that a business, at the end of the day, is only as far as you were able to get with your hypothesis and iterating on it before you ran out of time. I think a book is just the last iteration you were able to do before the editor wrenched it out of your hands. So iterate as much as you can, and I think that's just sort of where you, the starting point is starting out with somewhere crappy and not being worried about having that initial hypothesis be right. So number 8, I think I've got the numbering system right now. Try something new. Like, really do that. Think of something different you can do, regardless of what your job is, regardless of what your relationship is, whether it's in your personal life or professional life. I really believe in this. Try to do something different tomorrow to make it better than it was today. I think that doing that is a sign of optimism. It means that you think things can get better, that you don't accept today as the way it will be forever, or that you don't think it's going to suck for the rest of your life, which we've all had those moments, right, of being curled up on the bathroom floor and thinking that it's never going to get better. But if you don't try something new, then nothing will be different. So I really believe in that. Pick something, try something. Try saying something different in a conversation that's boring you. Try doing something differently at work in some kind of environment that is frustrating. It's really important to try something new, because I think that's the only way that you move forward. Number 7, the platinum rule. Treat others as they want to be treated. So I really think that the golden rule sucks. You should never treat anybody the way you want to be treated, because they're not you. So if you stop and think, well, what would I want, and I should do it that way for this other person, it's the number 1 problem, I think, in management overall, that you anticipate people to be like you. It's a mistake I've made a lot, and I think being a parent has really driven home to me every day. I have 2 kids who are very different, and I parent them the same way, and I get radically different results. And that's really driven home to me the idea that people at work are the same way. Everybody's different. I can't say the same things to the same people, to different people, and get the same result. You have to figure out where they're coming from. And so the platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. An important thing about life overall, I think, is to always expect failure. I think this is the thing. Somebody tonight asked me what was the most surprising thing about being an entrepreneur, and I think this was the thing. For the first few years, I really thought that things would get easier. I set these milestones. I said, when we do this, it'll get easier. When we do that, it'll get easier. When we get this $4 million in financing, it'll get easier. When we get this $10 million in financing, and now it's 30. And you know what? It hasn't gotten easier. It doesn't get easier. It's the same thing. By this point, you guys have the sense that I think a lot about parenting and leadership in the same way. And I think neither get easier. They just get different. That the challenges change. But it's not easier. A great insight that I got from Ben Horowitz's book, and if you guys are either entrepreneurs or thinking about starting your own company or actually doing anything different in your life, this is a great book. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And the great thing that he says is that CEOs of companies actually are operating on a 22% success rate. So that was awesome for me, because that's how I feel every day. Like, oh my God, I'm only getting 1 out of 5 things right. And it turns out that if everybody is, then it must be okay. So setting the expectation around what failure looks like and what rates of failure make sense, I think, is helpful. So now I know I need to try 5 things just so that one of them will work, right? Because if we're not trying 5 things, then if we are only trying 1 thing, the chance that that's going to work is, less than 50-50. Another important thing is that you can do anything for a day. So a lot of times people ask me, how do you do it all? How do you have a family? I have 2 sisters I love. I have girlfriends that I probably would like to see a lot more often than I do. I have a mom I'm close to, a husband that I adore. And so how do you figure this all out with a growing company, 200 employees, and over 1 million people now in our customer network? So the thing is that if I look at a week, I feel like there's no way I can get through it. Every week I look at my calendar and I think this is impossible. If I look at a day, I think, well, maybe. And if I look at an hour, it's like, oh, for sure, I can do that for the next hour. And so I think looking at things hour by hour, day by day, breaking it up into chunks of things that you can do and that feel within your control when everything feels out of control, I think that's my biggest piece of advice is you guys can all get through the next hour, even though I might be boring. You will live, and you will definitely make it through the next day. And one big lesson is that life is a whole series of days, just one after the other. So my friend Gretchen Rubin wrote a book called The Happiness Project. Do any of you guys know that? And one of her favorite sayings is that the days are long, but the years are short. And that's true. It's, sometimes kind of everything flies by much faster at the end of the day when you're looking back. But you can do anything for a day. Number 4, being kind to yourself. This is one that it's really hard to do for you. So a specific piece of actionable advice I give to people is to find 1 or 2 people who will do that for you. Who is your friend who will give you the courage to forgive yourself for a mistake you made? Who's the person who will say that's okay and who you'll believe? Because sometimes it's hard to give yourself the self-talk. If you think about, how would I talk to myself if I were my best girlfriend? Would I say, you suck, why did you do that? Or would you say, that's okay, we've all been there, and you can figure out a way out of this. I think that remembering to do for yourself what you would do for other people. So that's, I do believe in the reverse golden rule, I guess. So remember to do that is important. I also think a really easy thing is to ask for do-overs. I do this at work. I do this with my kids. You start a meeting and somebody has ordered something and you just jump in and you're like, why'd you do that? And then I know immediately that the tone of the whole room has shifted started, and that my approach is not going to be one that leads to the best decisions for Julep. So I've literally stopped and said, okay, guys, I'm sorry, I just came in with the wrong approach. Can I just have a do-over? Can we pretend this didn't happen? Let's start again. Hey, that's a great idea. I see where you're coming from and why you wanted that, but I don't quite understand like what this would do with, how this would impact this other thing over here. Can we talk about that? And, it's a really sort of artificial construct in some ways, but it works. Like, in my personal life with my kids, in my professional life, I haven't a single time asked for a do-over where the people haven't given it to me with a lot of positive intent. Number 3, this comes from a book that I love called Better. And it is really the reason I'm an entrepreneur, is because I believe in trying to do things in our company, in our world, that are better tomorrow than they are today. The writer is Atul Gawande, and he's a surgeon who was in the search to be better. And so his advice is find mentors, which I've talked about too. Just find people you can learn from everywhere. And he tells this great story about how he walks into a hospital room, and he's basically the top surgeon in his category, and he walks in with somebody who he wants to mentor him. So he's found this guy who wants to be his mentor, and he walks in, and to the patient, he's like, okay, great, I'm your doctor. And the patient says, who's that guy over there? And he says, that's my mentor. And then the patient's like face turns white. It's like, what's wrong with my doctor that he needs a mentor? So we maybe have a perception in our culture that asking for help, getting guidance, having a mentor is a bad thing, and it never is. Asking for help, getting guidance, asking for input from somebody who has a different point of view is always helpful. He also says to count something, like count the things, whatever it is, right? This is true in anything from fitness to technology to business results. If you count it, it will happen. So whatever it is you're trying to do, put a metric around it and trying to count the number of times the positive thing happens. And then write something. I really do believe in that. You don't have to be a great writer. There's power to capturing your thoughts in a moment in time and giving yourself that snapshot to go back and look at how much progress you've made. It's hard to celebrate if you don't have a benchmark. Let's see. Number 2, we're almost done. Celebrate successes along the way. So it's funny that it's sunny here today, because I am really famous for saying that success feels like sunshine in May in Seattle. And here's why. You feel like everybody else in the world has it and you don't. And, just when you think it's never going to happen, it shows up unexpectedly. And so we should all do what we're so great at doing here in the Northwest, which is to take out our lawn chairs. Sorry you're inside with me right now. But if it's sunny, you got to celebrate it, right? And that's something that I am not dispositionally set up for. I'm always sort of thinking about the next problem, the next issue. It's hard for me to stop and celebrate. And I really think about that, the way that Seattle people celebrate sunshine and, grab their lawn chairs. There's a great episode of Portlandia where there's a square meter of, I grew up in Canada, right? 3 square feet of sunshine, and you grab your lawn chair and you sit in it and bask in it for as long as you can until it moves 5 minutes later, and then you try to find it again. So I do think that success is like that. I don't anticipate in my life or through my journey with Julep that there is a successful endpoint. I expect it to be gray and rainy most of the time with unexpected sun breaks. And I think that expectation has helped a lot, because then it's not like, why haven't I arrived? Why is it still so hard? Why is, when are we going to be successful? Instead of asking those questions, it's about appreciating the sunshine when it happens. And the number 1 thing is don't give up. The only thing that is different from people who are successful, have more rays of sunshine at the end of the day than those who don't are just, it's about continuing to plug at it. It's about having 4 failures and picking yourself up and trying to do the 5th thing, and that ending up being successful. So, that's another thing that Ben Horowitz says. I think he says, don't punk out, but it's about just keeping going, that there's no magic to ideas. I think when I go to different forums where we're pitching venture capital firms, I always listen to the other ideas and I'm like, wow, they sound awesome, right? I mean, they sound phenomenal and world-changing, and so it's easy to kind of, on an idea or on a hardship, to kind of put yourself in a position where you think, well, my idea isn't as good, or I'm not as good of a leader, or I suck at this, or I suck at that. And the real difference, again, rocket science isn't rocket science. You just have to keep going. So with that, I would love to hear what you're interested in learning more about. Yeah.
Great presentation, first off. Thank you so much. How did you get decided that Dales was where you're going to go?
Initially it was really because it was about the place, it was about connection. So for me, the reason I started Julep is because I literally did throw a bridal shower for my best friend, and we were kicked out of the spa in Chicago because we were being too noisy, and we weren't being rowdy, right? It was just like, oh my God, you're getting married kind of energy. And I realized that there wasn't a place for women to get together. So there were sporting events and sports bars and golf for men, and men in business in particular. But when you think about, like, where can women go to celebrate, there wasn't a great place. So that's why when I started Julep, I drove down to Olympia 3 times by myself to go argue for an alcohol license so we could serve wine and at our parlors. And we wanted to create an environment that would be celebratory. I wasn't somebody, and I'm still probably not, who's like necessarily always has my nails perfect. I mean, I've got some like major chips. And so I think it's that part. It's not about perfection. It's just about fun and connection and about trying something new. Like 5 years ago, I might not ever have worn blue, but now I don't even think twice about it. It's sort of hey, this is a fun, beautiful color, and I want to try it. So I think that it always started off with being about empowering women and about connection and celebrating women for me. And throughout the whole process of growing the company into different channels and different products, it's been helpful that that's our true north. Yeah.
I was interested in how Julep reconciles within your advertising budget or whichever budget you do, because you do such a great job with your social media. And how do you reconcile sales through social media, or do you look at it as just a place to advertise and bring in prospective buyers and clients? Because, I mean, for my company, for example, I just find it hard to know how much money to put towards the social media campaigns and funding Facebook to, distribute a little bit more information. And I don't know how much I'm going to get back in return. Like, I can't say putting $300 this way is going to be a great advertising avenue for us. And I was interested in hearing how you...
Yeah, it's a question that we've asked a lot of people when we were growing too, right? So growth is always an important part of any starting company, because by definition, on day one, you have 0 customers. And so how to grow that from 0 to more than 0 is always a question. We've asked that question a lot, sort of how do you separate your budget, what's the right answer? And the truth is that there is no right answer for any company. One of the things that people have always told us actually is that Facebook is a great customer acquisition strategy for them. And it's only been recently that we figured that part of it out. So we have a very small social media team. We have 2 people, but I remember when that was a luxury, right? When it was all just me. So, you know, I don't say that lightly, like, hey guys, you should all have 2 social media people. That's, I recognize that that's hard. But we have the luxury of doing that, but it's not tons of people. We, you know, the first person we hired didn't like have any experience in that. She just has a great voice, and kind of we figured it out over time. So I think it's testing a lot and sort of, you know, taking baby steps along the way. There's no magic bullet for how to grow a company, what the right media mix is. It's different for every company, and what your customers want to hear. And I think it's just, I think the number one thing is thinking about people at the end of the day, like who is your customer, where is she seeing your ad, where is she interacting with you, and how does she feel when she is engaging. And I think it you know, you figure it out over time, and it's always with a startup, time is the enemy, because it's how much money you have before the time runs out. So you got to get the growth to happen before, you know, the rest of that turns out not to be your friend. So, you know, it's trying to make as educated a guess as possible. But I think starting small, testing lots of things. So this plie wand that we developed, one thing that we did, because I wasn't sure if anybody would want it, and for a company our size, we had to manufacture in China. We had to create sort of prototypes, and I think we created over 200 prototypes. So it was a huge endeavor. And one thing that we did early on was we created a fake ad for it, and we put it on Google just to see if anybody would click on it. And then when they clicked on it, it just went to our homepage. And so maybe some of those people were frustrated. Hopefully none of you guys. I'm sorry if you were. But, you know, it's a test, right? It's a test you can do without thousands of dollars of focus group testing if you want to test how something works. You know, with a few $100s, you can put your concept in front of, you know, lots of people. Like, I encourage all of you guys to have an idea to do that. Just find some way to capture it in an ad. Start using one of the display networks. You can go on, set your own ad account. You know, if you spend a little bit of time, you can figure it out. I did it myself, and I had no background in this area. And you can figure out if there's anybody who is at all interested. So if 0 people click on your concept, when you're targeting it to them, to the right people, the chances are you probably have to rethink that a little bit. And if a lot of people do, then it's not necessarily going to say that they're going to buy the thing, but it tells you you're headed in the right direction. Other? Yeah.
So I have a clothing business for 17 years, and you hit so much of my beginning of my business. And when I went for financing, I used to sell clothes out of my home, and I specialized in travel wardrobes. And I was venturing to step out into a retail store, and a lot of people said they would give funding, and it didn't happen. And I ended up starting my store 17 years now on a credit card. So I'm curious, when you started, where did your financing come from? Did your parents help you? You were great from the very beginning.
So first of all, I love your jacket, and awesome for you. Congratulations on your tenacity. You know, when I first started, actually it was, I had, you know, I often describe it like it was more of like a melting away of other opportunities, other ways that I could see my life unfolding, and this one just kept standing up there when everything else went away. And so that's what it felt like. So I wrote a business plan in the evenings. I worked my day job, came home, fed my kids, put them to bed, and then like from 9 till about 2 in the morning, I was much younger back then, but I would work on my business plan. And I kept sharing it with people. And so when I shared it with my mentors from BCG, where I used to work, and finally the person who was probably most professionally scared of in my whole life, like I once fell out of a chair when he called my cell phone, like just seeing his name made me spaz out. And he said that, basically he said, "Hey Jane, is this like NPR? If I write you a check, will you stop calling me?" because I didn't know the words. Like, do you guys know, those of you who haven't started a business, like, what are the words you use to ask somebody for money for your business? Will you invest? Like, that sounds too formal. I mean, I didn't know the words to say, like, can you write me a check? Like, what is that, right? Like, how do you ask somebody for money? Will you give me money? You don't say that. So I literally didn't know the words to ask for my first investment. And so after that, I thought about it, and I landed on a phrase that is, will you participate? Do you want to participate? And I said this one time to another entrepreneur friend of mine who's a much younger guy. And I said, how do you ask for money? And he says, do you want to be on the right side of history? So I did not have that phrase, but it was my mentors, like that first mentor who said he would invest, got me the courage to go and talk to a lawyer and ultimately quit my day job. And then actually 4 of the 5 partners I work with each invested $100K. And so that was my initial investment. Throughout, the bad times, my parents, I mean, I don't know how I could say that. I probably shouldn't say, like, their net worth is not that much. The 7-Eleven does not give you that much at the end of the day. And I ended up basically borrowing half of their net worth to fund a payroll one time when things were hard, when we were in the parlor business. So, people always say, like, sweating paychecks, right? Like sweating payroll. It's very different to actually see the faces of the people who won't be able to make their rent checks, and then I'm willing to do anything it takes to make that happen. And so, I've done that before. I mean, my parents have been super supportive, and after the initial crying episode, they got on board. So initially it was friends and family, and then it was like a lot of talking to venture capital, a lot of no's, and sort of very sporadic yeses that are like sunshine in Seattle in May. Yeah.
We talk a lot about mentors. How do you choose a mentor, and what do you look for in that relationship?
I think it's easier if you're just like, who's not a mentor and why, right? Like, there's something you really can learn from everybody. In the course of now hiring for Julep, we interview a lot of people, and that's been my attitude even in interviews, right? Like, sometimes pretty quickly that this person is not the right person, but you still want to be respectful and have a thoughtful conversation, and also, to extend the last chance, but also to get something else in return. I think it starts with the belief that everybody has something to share, and I feel like very few people in my life have had nothing to share. So it's like your job, sometimes you have to dig a little harder, but if you kind of start off with like everybody's a mentor, I think then that's helpful. One of the best things that happened to me was when I was a consultant at BCG. The best part about that was that every 3 months I got a whole new team and a whole new client set. So I could really be like a totally different person. So I sort of took the things that I thought that were effective from the last team, and I tried it on the next team. I just was like, let's try to see, is there a way I can incorporate that into who I really am in my authentic voice, so you can't be fake, but while incorporating the most effective things that you see. And I think that's how I learned so rapidly, is because I got to change the number of people I was working with so quickly. So I think just having your mind open to learning from everybody in front of you, because that's the best way to spend the time, right? It's like if you take it from sort of, hey, even the people that I'm in theory supposed to be mentoring now, right? It's sort of, I'm always thinking about what can I learn from you, because I know that I can learn from everybody. So I think, I don't think I have one person who is my mentor. I have the person who I call for this or for that. One of the people I respect a lot is Daryl Cavens, who's the CEO of Zulily. And there are times when I've called him and I've said, Daryl, you are the only person on the planet I can ask this question to. And so when you start with something like that, it's really hard for them to say no to you. So if you can think of, hey, if it's this kind of question, I would ask this person. If it's this kind of question, I would ask this person. And then if you call and you say, hey, you're the only person who can help me with this, and I know I'm not just like spraying and praying, I'm asking you to give me advice on this, and filing it away sort of for who is good at what. It's also a great way to see the world instead of seeing the world as a whole bunch of deficiencies. It gives you the ability to file everybody away as somebody who could potentially be helpful with something to offer. I know that sounds cheesy, but it sort of is totally true. Yeah?
Can you tell us the story behind the Maven concept, how it came around, and also what that's done for the business?
Yeah, so, the whole idea behind Maven is around community and loyalty and delighting the customers who are the most loyal to you. So what's frustrating is that it often gets lumped in. Our Maven program gets lumped in with other subscription programs because we came at it in a very different way. So, the backstory is that when I started the parlor business, so I opened the first 2 parlors and they went swimmingly well. Those of you guys who have been in Seattle and have kind of been to our first UD parlor and our downtown parlor, they were booked. It was hard to get an appointment from the very first day it opened. I was like, oh my God, I'm God's gift to business. This is awesome. And then 2006, oh gosh, what year was that the whole economy collapsed? Yeah, 2008, 2009 happened. We were just under our second location, so half of our business was under Washington Mutual, right? Do you guys know that they don't exist anymore? Overnight, and it didn't happen gradually, it happened right away, that 75% of our customer base and the email addresses stopped working, and they were all out of jobs, therefore not coming in to get services as much as they used to. So, we really looked at this, and we kind of took a data and emotional approach to it. On the data side, we said, what's happening? Let's look at the analysis and see, are women spending less? It actually turned out they were spending the same amount, they were just coming in less often. Interestingly, even people who had kept their jobs or who were fine in this bad economy still felt like it wasn't sort of empathetic, or it wasn't cool to still come in and get your nails done, like that it wasn't something that you should do as often. Everybody should be cutting back. And so it was a really, really hard time. And as we looked at what would be helpful, we really wanted to double down on giving the best value to the customers who came in the most often. And so that's how our program was born. We were like, instead of spraying, we could just give discounts. We could have lowered our prices. We could have just given discounts to everybody. And we said, no, we want to give bigger value to the people who come in more often. Because often, my favorite description of marketing is it's like being that jerk at the dance who's dancing with you but looking over your shoulder to see if there's a hotter girl in the room, right? Like as marketers, we're always chasing the next thing and maybe not appreciating so much the thing that's in our arms or the person that's in our arms. So we really were like, who's here now and how do we appreciate them more and how do we shower everything that we can on these people? And so that's how the Parlor subscription program was born. And then as that took off and people kept wanting the new products that we were developing and new nail colors as a reason to keep coming back, we started developing these products and we thought, wow, this is like a lot of effort for just 4 parlors. We really should be offering these products to everybody in the country. And so I actually went to Daryl Cavens and I said, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? And he said, hey, Jane, have you heard of Birchbox and Shoe Dazzle? Have you guys heard of these subscription companies? I hadn't at the time because I was super busy running a business, taking care of payroll, battling the worst recession in my lifetime. And so I hadn't heard of these other companies. And their view of subscription was really different. Like subscription, if you're a business person, looks really pretty on a spreadsheet. It is a beautiful Excel model for people continuing to buy from you till the end of time. But the reality is women are busy, they're super picky, they are, they want to be delighted, and they have the right to be delighted. And we came at it from the view of, hey, we know what women want from our parlors. We have this physical experience with them, and how do we translate that into an online experience? And quite frankly, I think that's why our program has survived where a lot of the others have struggled, is because it's from that idea of thinking through every detail and trying to delight her. My co-founder, Kate McDonald, came up with the idea at the Julep parlors. Actually, the downtown one was the first one that she worked on. We have a ledge at the cash checkout, because she was like, I hate it when I have my purse and there's nowhere to put it down to try to dig for my wallet, right? So I don't think any other retailer has this, where there's a purse ledge in front of the cash wrap. So smart. Like, why doesn't everybody have that? And then, like, the reason she thought of it is because she's thinking about every step of the way women walk through and trying to take away all of the pain points and just surprise her by anticipating something that she didn't even know that she needed. We kind of often call that like being the boyfriend you never had, like the one who is like thinking about what you need before you can even articulate it yourself. And I think that's sort of been why it's been successful for us. I mean, now it's the way that we can innovate. So Maven today enables us to launch new products every single month and do it sort of with the quality and the prestige level that is basically top of the market. I mean, our products are really the highest quality in every category that we're offering. So just because we're fast doesn't mean we make any compromises in that respect. And I think it's because we're thinking about her, and we know that she is super demanding.
By the way, I did get my cleaning one.
Yay!
I think we could listen to you all day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. I also wanted to, we just as FGI wanted to thank tonight some of our sponsors, 425 magazine, which you have on your chair to take with you, as well as Long Shadow Winery. We had our food tonight catered from Rainier Valley Country Club. I hope that you will eat more, please. And Acorn Flowers and Magnolia did our flowers. And just as a side note, our bakery items tonight are from Shine Bakery. And I don't know if you've watched TV lately, but this last night and yesterday morning, a young woman named Rachel Lingenbrink is 17 years old, and she started her own bakery. And her mother's actually here in the back row, Terry. But I just thought it was kind of cool that we have this successful woman and businesswoman here, and then we have this very young 17-year-old entrepreneur bringing us our baked goods tonight. So I wanted to acknowledge everyone for that.